Welcome, Simon, to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have you as my guest today. Would you like to introduce yourself to listeners?
Yeah, thanks, Aoife. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, my name's Simon Stapleton. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Truthsayers, and it's our objective to help workplaces become more authentic. We do that using technology that we've developed over the last 10 years, which uses the advances in psychology, neuroscience, and technology. And the way we apply that is to help employees and employers communicate their truth.
It's brilliant. It's such an interesting topic, and I know we connected through LinkedIn, and we've had lots and lots of conversations over the last year and a half or so. Probably it could even be longer. I
Oh,
don't
that, yeah.
remember when we first spoke, but always such interesting. I think what drew us to each other was this deep interest in data and research, and
Right.
creating happier work environments as well. And I know today we're going to talk a little bit about the technology and what you can actually do. And I think I made a bit of a gaffe in terms of it's not about lying at work. It's about why do people feel that they can't necessarily be honest at work. And I think that's a really, really great place to start. Why is it that people feel that they can't be their true selves at work?
Well, I think there's probably a universal fact that at some point we all lie. We have all lied in the workplace, and probably most of us have lied many, many times, and it could be every single day. And that's a great example of a lie is when you walk into the office, somebody says, "How are you?" and you go, "Yeah, yeah, fine, yeah." And actually, you might
It's
not
a
be
great
fine, and
example.
there's a good chance of that.
Yeah.
And in fact, there was some data research early in the year, which I think I shared with you actually, that 80% of people lie about being okay in the workplace.
Mm.
And that's a staggering number if you think there's a lot of people, most people, who are not being honest about the way they really are, the way they're feeling inside, and would rather put a veneer on it, that yeah, yeah, I'm fine, and just go on about their business. And as we know, when people are not authentic, chances are they're not very happy, or that it impacts your mental well-being, and that can't be right, surely. And so we've developed a technology which, as I said, uses neuroscience and psychology to help employees and employers communicate what's really going on in an anonymous, safe way. And what we found is that some of the results are quite startling. And we actually use a traditional method to compare it to. So we're able to see what people have said versus what they're really feeling, and the differences that are really the most interesting. So, for example, we do a lot of work actually on diversity and inclusion, which is quite a thorny issue, and it's very much one of those things that most businesses are getting to grips with right now, particularly in the last 18 months. And what we're finding is that um, authenticity between co-workers is actually far less than that between manager and subordinate. And so what that's saying is you people sat next to you on the bank of desks that are being less authentic with you than they are with their manager. And I just find that amazing. That why can't people be honest with each other about their
Mm.
feeling?
Yeah.
Actually, you're really annoying me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you eating crisps in my ear is really really annoying me. Instead, no, no, it's okay. You carry on. And that noise is starting to really affect my
Yeah.
day. You
I
get a
can I
picture.
can
It's
I
just
can directly relate to those kinds of experiences for sure.
yeah. And there's that could be quite a small thing,
Yeah.
not necessarily in the moment, but in perspective, it could be a small thing. It's other things like I mean, I'm sure most of the people listening will recognise it, where there's a project meeting or an operations meeting, and there's the leader saying, let's get this done today. I want it done like this. I want it done like that. Are you up for it? Can we do this? And everybody's going, yeah, 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 yeah. We can do that. And as they're leaving the room and the door is not even shut yet, they're all saying to each other, "It'll never work. We'll never be able to do that. We can't possibly hit those targets." And that happens all the time. I've done it. I've been the leader and the person in out the room, and you got to think, why are people not honest? What's stopping people saying, actually, no, we're not going to be able to hit that date, or we can't do it to that level of quality. Now, for those business psychologists, there's groupthink, and I'm actually not talking about groupthink. It's not people necessarily saying yes because just the person next to them is. It's more about what's preventing me speaking my mind and holding my hand up and saying, no, I don't agree with that. And what we found is psychological safety is one of the big causes of that, or lack of it. The lack of that sense of feeling safe enough, to put your hand up and not feel like you're being judged, or you're not being, you won't be ostracized or pounced upon for sharing your view. I mean, personally, I remember this was about 20 years ago. I was a senior manager in an organization where the leaders, the very top leaders, were wanting to accelerate a program of work. And I did put my hand up. And I got absolutely vilified for it. In front of everyone, I was said my glass was half empty in front of everyone. And, and of course, I was in my, I'm in my late 20s at the time. And I remember shrinking down a bit and thinking, maybe I'd better shut up.
Yeah, yeah.
Why should I have done that? I didn't put my hand up to be a troublemaker.
Yeah.
I put my hand up because I cared.
To challenge. Yeah, exactly.
To stop something bad happening.
Yeah.
My psychological safety feeling of it was impacted by that.
Well, this is it. And I mean, I've had similar experiences myself where I made a suggestion and was very firmly told that's not how we do things around here.
Yeah.
And, do you think that I shared any more ideas with that organization? Absolutely not. It's a huge, huge problem. I'm curious if we can take a step back for a minute to try and understand the difference between, it's interesting because I think the general consensus, and exactly as you pointed out, Simon, would be that the trust is more among colleagues rather than with a person and their manager. And so I suppose there's maybe two different aspects to this. There's that sense of us and them. So it's us as individual contributors, employees, versus the management or the leadership or whatever it might be. But there's also this, I don't know, is it a sense of competition among employees where there's that slight lack of trust because you don't know whether or not you can, you don't know whether you can watch your back, and the underlying cause of that as well, what is actually driving that sort of behavior. And maybe at this stage it's a guess, but I just find it really, really curious.
Well, the one thing's for sure that the trust and the psychological safety is an issue for pretty much all the businesses that we've worked with. So it seems to be quite a common factor.
Yeah.
And the causes are potentially, numerous. And the one thing we've found which is fairly common to all of it is that the communication and the ability to be honest without being reprimanded or kind of excommunicated is just not been there, and it does differ depending on the type of businesses. So we find the blue collar businesses tend to be more kind of backstabbing. You get clicks form.
Yeah, interesting.
And you get, it's almost like being in a prison yard. Those kind of groups and cliques.
Yeah.
Whereas in the white collar industries, it tends to be a bit more sophisticated and under the covers, if you like,
A bit more
That's
underhand, a bit more uh,
yeah, yeah,
Machiavellian,
absolutely.
maybe, or something.
Yes, yes, yeah. And you can, you can see why that might be the case because the kind of professional behavior expectations, it differs in those between those kind of businesses. But nevertheless, I mean, whatever's causing it, I think one ability to understand it and know it's actually happening is key. A lot of the leaders, I think, have their heads in the sand on this kind of issue, and probably see in others how they see themselves. So if they're, if as a leader, I'm feeling okay about my ability to talk with my peers, then everyone else must be, right. Our culture is such that everything is open, and actually we're finding
Yeah.
the the leader's view of the culture is quite different than the people working in the doers in the business, which I don't think that's a new problem, but we're showing that with the data that's still there as it always ever has been. The unfortunate, what we can do is perhaps show in which locations that might be more acute, or
Mm.
what tiers in the organization, or even things like gender or race and things like that.
Yeah.
We're able to more pinpoint where those issues are with the
Yeah.
tech.
Yeah. Certainly,
Yeah,
I have worked with clients where the leaders think that they've created this amazing environment where people can be open and honest and share their point of view because that's what the leaders do. And the leaders
yeah,
feel free to be open and honest and share what's going on. But actually, the perception from the employees was that they couldn't really go up against what was being shared. And so, exactly that, there wasn't that sense of psychological safety in those organizations where that was happening. So it's really interesting because the leaders often have this skewed vision
right.
of what's actually happening, but they're not really in touch with what's going on with the employees, which I mean that in itself can cause huge problems.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily done with any particular malice or
Absolutely not. No,
deliberate. It's
it's
just
just a
perfectly
yeah, the lack
human.
of awareness. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and particularly in the slightly smaller businesses, perhaps that have been um, founder grown. So the guys at the top are the ones who started the thing. So they probably started that business with the openness and the transparency from the start. But obviously, as your team expands, as you get more diverse groups of people joining, as you start to get other locations which are not necessarily in the hot house that where you started, things change, but not necessarily the leaders are catching up with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
understandable, but not necessarily excusable, I'd
Mm.
say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from everything that I talk about, everything that I research, and the clients that I work with as well, for me, it comes down to this concept of values and how
Right.
important values are. And I think if you start an organization like yourself, like myself, and you have certain values and you build up the foundations and you're probably a little bit further ahead than I am, Simon, but with the idea being that we will grow and we could potentially have multiple locations and we certainly will have staff, um, and you grow and you grow and you grow, but it's important to hire those people whose values align. So if you have someone who have a strong core value of being open and honest, then they are the ideal people. If
Right.
that's the foundation that you've built that organization on, and if you've built an organization already and you have that culture where people can't be open and honest and exactly to the point, like maybe you don't even realize that that's
Mm.
going on, then it's about finding out what's going on here, and and really taking responsibility for the culture in that organization and making sure that everyone can feel that they can be open and honest.
Well, yeah, I mean that last point is absolutely right. And we've just done with another partner some work on understanding how culture affects authenticity,
Mm.
and whether culture is almost the cause of a lack of it, authenticity as people try and fit into that culture. Now, I remember when I was much earlier in my career, I joined a consultancy in London. They had quite a strong culture. It was very much about play hard, work hard, play hard. And I wanted to impress my managers. I wanted to be part of that. And I remember adapting the way I was, the way I adapted me to fit in. And in doing so, I actually was less authentic. And I remember, it got to a point where that trying to be someone who I'm not got so stressful. I was on the brink of a nervous breakdown. Because the culture was such that I needed to be something else. And so I think the word of caution to leaders is the culture might in some cases be damaging to people as they're trying to fit in, who have not necessarily been hired originally because they don't share the same values, although they might have said they are. And this comes back to this whole honesty again. It's the recruitment process. Where's the checks and balances in the recruitment process? Because if somebody says they share this value with you, do they really share it, or are they just saying it? Which is just storing up problems for the future, I think. And it's not actually what I think, that we've got the data to show it as well. So it's got that authenticity checkpoints have got to start right at the beginning of somebody's journey into the organization before they've even signed an employment contract.
Yeah, this is it. And it's interesting that you say that. In the research that I did for my dissertation last year, one of the, I always talk about this concept of fit, and sometimes people get confused and they think that I mean it's about molding yourself to fit in with that environment, which is what the point that you kind of touched on there, Simon. But it's not. It's about finding that right environment where you can really fulfill your potential from the employee's perspective. And then from an organization's perspective, it's finding that right person who holds those same values, whose needs that you can satisfy through the work that you provide. The skills take kind of a lesser importance, with the exception of a couple of different roles where you might need to have a level of qualification or expertise. Brain surgery. I'm not going to have brain surgery from you tomorrow. Thanks, Simon. But people often talk about X number of years of experience, which is meaningless unless you've had failures, essentially, and you have been able to learn going through those processes, rather than having 10 years of basically cruisy experience where you haven't encountered any issues. It's kind of meaningless in the workplace. It's all about learning from those failures. But coming back to this idea of fitting in versus molding yourself, one of the things that came out from the qualitative research, and this isn't direct research I did, it's research that I read about, was this idea of masking and like putting up a front, and how damaging it is, to do that. And you were saying like you were on the brink of burnout. Like that's horrific. So it is so important to find those right people to begin with, to bring them into your organization based on the values. And I know we've discussed in the past, my kind of grand goal, my big idea is finding a way to be able to do that in a meaningful way. And it sounds like you're kind of doing it from are they being authentic? I'm like, well, how do we assess people's values at the outset and find out what they are? Right. And do they match not just with the values we say we have, but with the values that are being expressed in that organization, the values that are being lived in that organization? So that's kind of the ultimate goal, I suppose, of where I would love to get to, using data, using research, being the data nerd that I am.
Well, good to hear it, because that's where good decisions come from, isn't it?
Exactly.
Using your instinct and data. We actually have done some work in that space, and we developed a tool called Culture Fit. And much like you say, actually, it's not about finding people for absolute fitness. It's more, does your culture fit the organization you've got?
Yeah.
And actually, it's probably easier to adjust the culture than it is to adjust the people, particularly big organizations. That would be incredibly expensive and time consuming exercise to go and recruit a load more people and get rid of those that don't fit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
that's a good point,
but
actually. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so that tool is predominantly looks at the organization from a values perspective. We call them cultural artifacts, but they're values at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we measure people's um, observations of what they see within the organization and compare that to what's important to them.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of inward reflection and there's an outward reflection, and we see where they overlap. And some things in the Venn diagram map really nicely, and
Yeah.
some don't at all. And
Yeah.
we'd say those are culturally obscure, and something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And the tech we use to do that is a quite a different kind of tech. It uses response times to certain stimuli, statements, and it's the hesitation. It's the hesitation to completing the task is how we get our data. Because
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
if you're forced to do something that you
Nanoseconds.
don't agree with, yeah, sometimes, yeah,
Yeah.
you're forced to do something you don't agree with, you'll hesitate, and you'll
Yeah.
hesitate subconsciously, non-consciously, before you've even got a chance to think about it. And
Yeah.
that's how we get our data using our tools. So it's one of those where you can't really lie, or you can't try and fake it. It catches you out in terms of by the time you've thought of falsifying your result, it's your chance has gone to complete the task. It
Yeah.
happens very quick.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's how we get our data about what people are really feeling. And then we'll
Yeah.
ask them, as I said, we'll ask them to complete a traditional survey, which is what they're thinking, what they're consciously thinking, and we compare the two.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. So one is the kind of the thinking, and the other is kind of the subconscious. What's going on
The
there?
feeling. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we launched the business with an aim just to do the feeling, because we thought actually all the traditional methods, they don't work. We're going to be blinkered and just do the feeling stuff. But we did find, we were asked to do the thinking stuff too. Actually, it's a really valuable data set. It's not
Because you can
necessarily
compare.
absolute. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. The comparison is the most interesting data of all. It's where you
Yeah.
see the big gaps between what people are thinking and what they're feeling, or what they're saying. And sometimes we've had gaps of, on a scale of 0 to 100, we've had 80% gaps between, I'm feeling this, which
Yeah.
actually might be super low, but I'm saying this, which is super high. And you think,
Yeah.
gosh, there's a massive gap there. Why are people so inauthentic about what they're feeling on these certain issues? It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And are there any other kind of highlights coming out from the data that you can share? Like that's not kind of that's not private or anything like that. But I know, like we one of the interesting things that we spoke about earlier was this idea that say the trust between peers is less than the trust between a person and their manager. So is there anything else, like maybe around the DE and I or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Particularly from an inclusion, which feeling included comes from an emotional place. It's not a rational thing. It's something which you either feel or you don't, or the
Yeah.
opposite is you're feeling excluded. And we find that in some cases those gaps can be considerable. In fact, the example I gave about the 80% difference was a DEI survey,
Yeah.
and those are that particular data point was around whether my peers think I'm doing a good job, and it's the individual answering it about what their peers think, and what's really happening there, which is the most fascinating thing of all, is it's about projection, because
Yeah.
because the individual doesn't know for sure what their peers are thinking about them.
Yeah.
It's almost what they think their peers should be thinking about them. And so
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
very much a reflective point,
Yeah.
and a projective point.
Yeah.
And so, that's been just amazing to see how people project their thoughts onto other people, and it really reveals what they think about themselves.
Yeah.
The whole point of best work comes up very often. Um, in many cases, kind of, people are thinking they are their best self, but they're not doing their best work, and we've seen that drop significantly, through lockdown and COVID. That, the 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 expectations people put on themselves are unrealistic.
Okay.
The quality and the speed of doing their work, and the ability to actually do the same job whilst under lockdown as they were
Okay. Yeah.
when they were
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
together. And so shouldn't be any surprise to actually anybody. But of course, what we also find is that the employees are not telling their leaders, "I'm struggling to do
Yeah.
this," or "I'm not hitting my quality targets or my
Yeah.
productivity." Um,
Understandable,
but
because it's
yeah,
that fear
yeah,
of reprimand again. It's that lack of
of
psychological
course,
safety. So I
yeah,
can
for sure,
see,
for
yeah,
sure.
I can see, Simon, exactly why you're saying that everything kind of boils down to this, and this idea of trust and psychological safety across anything you're doing. A couple of things that I wanted to touch on was, there was this idea of, it struck me that it's a quick fix to, if you find that there's a huge difference between how I perceive myself and how I don't know how others perceive me. Well, that's kind of
Yeah,
like, let's create a feedback culture. Let's talk about what people's strengths are. Let's get the conversation going. So that was one thing that struck me. And then this other idea that, people think that they're their best selves, but they're not giving their best work. Like, that's kind of a differential in itself. And I did a survey. It's not exactly scientifically robust. It was a poll that I ran on LinkedIn, asking people whether or not they were fulfilling their potential in their current role, and 80% of people said that they weren't. And I thought that was phenomenal. You're not fulfilling your potential in your current role. Like, what is the gap there? Any thoughts to share around how people can reach more of their potential at work? Or is it that they're blaming themselves for not working to their highest performance during a pandemic?
well, I think the expectations people put on themselves is the, big issue there. I don't think people deliberately do a bad job, do they? It's very rare to find someone who deliberately turns up at
Yeah,
work to do a bad job. So
exactly.
most people
Yeah.
want to do a good job, don't they?
Yeah.
It's just what's
But it's providing that
what's
opportunity to do a good job as well. So I know I have
right,
been in roles where I haven't felt that I could reach my potential in that role because the role didn't require the skills that I have.
right, and that's, I think there's two bits there. One is, am I doing everything for me that I can to change that? And
Yeah.
then there's the environment, or my manager helping me do that. Am I being honest with my quarterly reviews or whatever the process is? Am I
Yeah.
am I using that? Or am I just keeping stum and not being open and honest about what I need to my manager? And
Yeah.
again, as a rational individual, of course, you're going to say, "Well, I'll speak to my manager and we'll get this sorted." But we know that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
What's getting in the way?
Yeah.
What's getting in the way of me reaching my potential? Something that my employer can help me do. If there's a dead stop, if there's a dead stop, it's like a brain surgeon stacking shelves in a supermarket.
Yeah.
That job needs to be done, and so it's not about demeaning that job, but that individual is not going to get fulfilled doing that. And
Yeah.
speaking to their manager would be pointless. That's
Yeah.
just an obvious thing.
Yeah.
But if that brain surgeon was in a high-end hospital, and they're not being filled, that is the conversation that could be.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know a brain surgeon, so I might be completely wrong there. Um, But I think it comes down to and the reason why I love the name of your blog, being happiness at work,
Yeah.
is so much unhappiness at work is a result of people not being able to be honest and authentic, and not necessarily because they created that, but it's just the environment, situation means they can't be. And for me, I think one thing is if inauthenticity results in unhappiness and probably, as we've been talking about, lack of fulfillment. Some ways, what is there to lose now about being honest? If I get fired for speaking my mind, some ways, so what?
Yeah.
I think the only thing that puts the brakes on that a bit is some people can't afford to lose their jobs, can
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
they?
Yeah. But it's a terrifying fear as well, and it's probably
Yeah,
unfounded. Like you're not, and I've spoken about. It's interesting that psychological safety comes up again because I've spoken about this multiple times on the
yeah,
podcast in the past, and one thing it sticks in my mind. Duana Blomstrom, she was like, no one's going to get fired for just speaking their mind. You're not going to get fired for speaking up at work.
yeah.
There is that real fear, but who has ever been fired for challenging how things are done?
Well, in my case, I said earlier that I felt that, so
Yeah, 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 yeah,
it's a real thing that happens for everyone.
yeah,
Rationally, you can think, it's just ridiculous to think that,
for
but
sure.
instinctively, innately, in the situation, you think otherwise. So, I think both as an individual and as a leader, it should be our mission to help people be more authentic,
Yeah,
which will improve the quality of life in the workplace. Will help people become happier and more productive. You know, I think why shouldn't we feel that's a very noble and positive thing to do?
yeah,
And we might hear some stuff we don't like. We might be told actually that thing we've invested loads in actually it's rubbish.
yeah.
But so what? Let's
It's
let's
worth it.
let's
Yeah, at least now
it's worth it.
you've taken the learning from that.
Yeah,
Now and I'm exactly the same in my business as well. Like you don't
yeah,
know until you take those risks and you get
right.
the learning from it. And you don't throw good money after bad. You don't throw good time after bad. You take the learning and you move on. Simon, conscious of time here, but I'd love to get your understand what makes you happier at work.
Great question. And actually, it comes back to what I've been talking about is being myself.
Yeah,
I was not myself for quite some time at work, and now I feel I've found myself and I can be myself. And
yeah,
I work with some great people where I'm totally authentic. It makes me very happy.
brilliant. Love that. And if people want to reach out and connect with you, find out more about what it is you do, what your company offers, how can they do that?
Well, you can go to our website, which is truthsayers.io. We are just about to refresh it, so bear with us. Otherwise, you can go to our LinkedIn page, which is Truthsayers Neurotech, or just connect with me, Simon Stapleton, on Truthsayers.
Yeah, and I must say, I love all the stuff that you share, Simon. I don't often see the company stuff, but I know that you, on your personal page, share the company stuff as well, which is great. Always really, really interesting insight. So thank you so much for your time today. Really, really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to be here today. Thank you.